The bell above the convenience store rang at 11:47 p.m. Ethan Cole looked up from the register, exhausted and counting the minutes until closing. The night was quiet, almost peaceful. Then two men walked in, hoodies pulled low, faces half covered. One of them pulled a gun without hesitation. The air changed instantly. Ethan raised his hands, heart pounding, knowing something was terribly wrong and that this night would never truly end. "Open the register," the gunman said. Ethan tried to stay calm as his fingers shook. The machine jammed. The second man panicked, breathing fast, eyes darting. Everything happened in seconds. A gunshot exploded through the store. Ethan felt a crushing impact in his chest before collapsing to the floor. The men ran. The bell rang again. Blood spread across the tiles as the lights buzzed overhead. Ethan woke up 3 days later in a hospital room filled with machines and beeping monitors. Doctors called it a miracle. The bullet had missed his heart by less than an inch. A detective stood at the foot of the bed, emotionless. No witnesses, no clear faces, poor footage. The case would be difficult, he said. Ethan realized justice sounded a lot like an excuse. Weeks passed. Medical bills piled up. The detective stopped calling back. 6 weeks later, the case was officially closed. Ethan watched the security footage again and again, memorizing every movement. The police saw randomness. Ethan saw patterns. This wasn't a mistake. This was business. And someone had been paid to make it disappear. Ethan sold everything he owned. He deleted his online life and left town without saying goodbye. For 2 years, he existed only in cash payments and cheap motels. He trained his body and sharpened his mind. Surveillance, cybersecurity, patience. Revenge was no longer anger, it was discipline, and he was becoming very good at it. The first name on Ethan's list wasn't the shooter. It was Officer Daniel Hargreave, the cop who lost evidence. The cop who closed the case early. Anonymous files reached Internal Affairs bank records, audio timelines. Hargreave was arrested quietly. No drama, no mercy. Ethan watched from across the street, feeling nothing but certainty. Once the first thread was pulled, everything unraveled. Ethan followed money trails and shell businesses. The robbery crew answered to one man, Marcus Reed. Reed never touched a gun. He didn't need to. He lived comfortably, protected by layers of fear and corruption. Ethan didn't rush. He watched, learned, waited. Years passed. Anonymous tips flooded law enforcement agencies. Crime rings collapsed quietly. Journalists whispered about an unknown source. Ethan became a ghost. He slept lightly, moved carefully, and never acted emotionally. Killing was easy. Destroying power without becoming the villain that required intelligence. The second gunman was named Tyler Brooks. Ethan found him in Oklahoma, working construction, trying to stay clean. Tyler broke down instantly. He hadn't meant for anyone to die. Ethan recorded the confession. Tyler testified. One piece of the puzzle locked into place. The shooter was next. Marcus Reed stayed careful, but comfort makes people predictable. Ethan studied him for months. Routines, locations, weaknesses. The final meeting happened in a forgotten motel on Route 66. Reed reached for his gun. Ethan was faster. He pinned him down and turned on the recorder. "Do you remember the store?" Ethan asked. Marcus laughed, then cried. He confessed to everything: names, payments, locations. Ethan didn't kill him. He walked away and sent the recording to the FBI. Justice didn't need a bullet. It needed proof. The headline appeared the next morning: "Cold case solved after anonymous tip." Ethan watched the news, then turned off the TV. The convenience store still stood. Fresh paint, new owner, no memorial. But Ethan remembered. Justice hadn't come loudly. It came quietly. And this time, it stayed. After Marcus Reed's arrest, the city exhaled. Prosecutors moved fast, stacking charges like bricks: money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder. Ethan stayed invisible, watching from a distance as the system finally did its job. People called it a breakthrough. Ethan knew better. It wasn't luck. It was pressure, applied patiently, in the right places, over time. During the trial, names spilled out like poison. Dirty cops, paid informants, silent partners. Each testimony confirmed what Ethan had always known: the city wasn't broken. It was bought. He listened to court recordings alone in a dark room, not smiling, not celebrating. This wasn't victory. This was cleanup after a long neglected crime scene. Ethan could have stopped there. Most people would have. But something inside him refused to rest. Justice had been served, but damage doesn't disappear with convictions. He still woke up at night, chest tight, hearing the gunshot echo. Healing, he realized, wasn't about revenge. It was about choosing what kind of man survived the bullet. He returned to the town he had fled years ago. Same streets, same silence. The convenience store looked different, brighter, cleaner, almost harmless. Ethan stood across the road, unnoticed, watching customers come and go. None of them knew how close death once lived there. He hoped they never would. Ethan walked inside. The bell rang. His pulse jumped, despite himself. A teenage cashier smiled and said hello. No guns, no fear. Ethan bought a bottle of water and left a generous tip. As he walked out, the bell rang again. This time, the sound didn't haunt him. It released him. News articles slowly stopped mentioning the case. Another scandal replaced it. Another headline. Ethan understood how easily the world moved on. Justice didn't need applause. It needed completion. He packed his things again, lighter this time. No anger, no list. Just distance between who he was and who he had become. Some nights, Ethan still thought about the men who pulled the trigger and ran. Not with hatred, but with clarity. Violence had created him. Restraint had defined him. He had proven something to himself that night in the motel. Power wasn't in pulling the trigger. It was in choosing not to. Years later, a journalist wrote a book about the case. They called the source unknown. Online forums argued whether a vigilante had been involved. Ethan never commented. Truth didn't need witnesses. It only needed results. Somewhere on the road, he smiled faintly, knowing the story was finally finished. The world never learned Ethan Cole's name, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Justice didn't belong to heroes or headlines. It belonged to the quiet ones, the ones who endured, adapted, and refused to become monsters while fighting them. Ethan drove on, leaving behind a city that would never know how close it came to losing itself. Months later, Ethan received a letter slipped under a motel door. No return address. Only 3 words. "You're being watched." He didn't panic. Instead, he smiled faintly. The life he'd built in shadows had prepared him for exactly this. He traced the paper with his fingers, remembering the long nights of patience. Someone thought they could intimidate him. They were wrong. Ethan traced the handwriting. It wasn't Marcus Reed's, nor Tyler Brooks. It was new. Someone else, maybe a copycat, or someone seeking revenge for the chaos he'd caused. He packed his essentials silently, leaving the motel key on the counter. No mess, no signs. A ghost doesn't announce departure. Only a trail of consequences remains. Outside, the Nevada desert stretched endless and silent. Ethan's car waited, engine humming softly. He checked mirrors. Roads empty. Freedom felt heavy, like a responsibility. He drove north, through empty highways, where the horizon seemed to swallow him whole. Every mile, every curve reminded him, the past doesn't vanish. It waits, patient, just like he did. In Chicago, the city roared differently. Ethan observed from a rooftop, skyscrapers towering above, traffic a river of light. He followed subtle patterns, guards at certain buildings, luxury cars parked in alleyways, movements that told more than words ever could. This new threat wasn't random. They were calculating, watching, preparing. He felt the familiar thrill of anticipation. Ethan infiltrated underground networks quietly. Black market whispers, dirty cops, organized crime nodes. Every detail mattered. Every small error could be fatal. He mapped connections, memorized faces, watched habits. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival, his and the city's. Lessons from the past were weapons now, sharpened, sharper than any blade. One night, in a back alley near the river, Ethan confronted a new operative man claiming knowledge of Marcus Reed's associates. No names, just hints. A test. Ethan didn't flinch. He recorded every word, every gesture. One slip, and this man would vanish, like so many others. Control was power. Silence was louder than a gunshot. Weeks passed. Patterns emerged. The new threat wasn't reckless. They were organized. But Ethan had patience. He set traps of information, leaks of data, planted decoys. Every move was deliberate. If they made one mistake, Ethan would know, and he always did. This was the dance he had perfected years ago. Calm, precise, deadly without showing it. Finally, the trail led to a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. The target, unknown. The stakes, everything. Ethan studied the layout from across the street. Entrances, security cameras, guard rotations. One misstep would mean failure. He exhaled slowly, letting the city's sounds settle in. The night had a rhythm, and he knew it. Ethan didn't move until the coast was clear. Then, like a shadow, he entered the building through a hidden service entrance, avoiding cameras with perfect timing. Floors creaked slightly under his careful steps. The air smelled of expensive leather and anxiety. Every moment sharpened his senses. He was no longer the victim. He was the consequence. The penthouse was eerily quiet. Ethan moved along the shadows, memorizing every details, the expensive furniture, the silent security cameras, the faint hum of air conditioning. His heart beat steadily. He wasn't rushing. Years of training had taught him that patience often mattered more than speed. The target could be anyone, but he would find them. In the lounge, a figure emerged, someone who had been pulling strings behind Marcus Reed's empire. Ethan froze, studying him. The man smiled confidently, unaware of how closely he was being watched. Ethan let the tension build, every second counting. This was the moment years of planning had led to. One wrong move, and the opportunity would vanish. Ethan's phone vibrated softly in his pocket, preset timers tracking guards outside. Each vibration reassured him. He stayed motionless, blending with the darkness. The man walked closer to the balcony, speaking on the phone, unaware of the storm waiting silently behind him. Ethan's patience was infinite. Every calculated second increased his advantage. He followed the man's patterns for weeks. Movements, meetings, connections. Ethan already knew the names, the locations, the hidden accounts. But tonight, the final confrontation wasn't about killing. It was about control. Evidence. The perfect strike. Ethan stepped into the light briefly, letting the figure notice the shadow for the first time. The confrontation was silent. Ethan recorded everything: confessions, threats, involuntary slips. The figure realized, too late, that his empire of manipulation had a flaw. "Ethan Cole," he begged, cursing, trying to manipulate the shadows. Ethan didn't flinch. He knew this dance. The city's secrets, the lies, the betrayals, all would be exposed. Ethan left the recording behind, uploaded it anonymously to multiple law enforcement channels. Evidence, proof, and full confessions, all without leaving a trace. The figure's world crumbled. Luxury cars, offshore accounts, hidden partners, everything unraveling. Ethan didn't stay to watch. He vanished into the city night, a ghost again, satisfied not with vengeance, but justice. Weeks later, the city reported arrests across multiple states. Marcus Reed's associates were caught, finances frozen, networks dismantled. Headlines praised anonymous sources. No one knew Ethan Cole's name. He watched from a distant rooftop, sipping black coffee, feeling neither pride nor joy, only clarity. The work was complete, yet the world moved on as if nothing had happened. Ethan drove across the country on quiet highways, blending into the scenery. Nevada desert, Chicago streets, lakefront views, they all passed silently under the wheels of his car. Memories of gunshots, blood, and betrayal replayed, not as pain but as lessons. He understood now. Survival meant patience, restraint, and knowing when to strike and when to walk away. Sometimes he thought of the men he had faced, the nervous ones, the corrupt cops, the crime lords, not with hate, but with a detached understanding. Violence had created him. Restraint had defined him. He realized true power wasn't in retaliation, but in shaping the outcome quietly, invisibly, in leaving no trace except consequences. Years later, an article surfaced about an unknown vigilante who brought down a criminal network. Ethan never revealed himself. The world only remembered the result. He drove through empty roads, a quiet smile on his face, knowing the story was finished. The city survived, unaware of how close it had come to collapse. And somewhere, in the silence, justice had a name, but no one knew it.